All right, I'm going to go right to our next presentation here. Greg Gorgas, from President CEO of Artello Biosciences, ticker ARTL. Let's bring Greg on. Oh, look at that. There he is. Greg, good afternoon. How are we doing?
Good afternoon. Yes, good. Thank you.
There's your presentation, and let's go right into this.
All right. Well, Artello is very pleased to be here at the Benzinga conference. And as was said, we're traded on the NASDAQ under the symbol ARTL. We're a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company. We're developing a portfolio of therapeutic candidates, and we're focused in on novel drug targets where our founding was really that there's a treasure trove of opportunity in modulating the endocannabinoid system, a system that every human being is born with. And we're going to share with you a little bit about our company. I will be making some forward-looking statements. We would invite all investors to look at our filings, which are linked on our website at artellobio.com. Hopefully, in the next few minutes, I will be able to share with you 5 main features of Artello. 1 is that we have a novel drug pipeline, not just a single asset. 2, that we have near-term milestones over the next 3, 6, 12, and 18 months that should drive valuation for the company. That we are going after billion-dollar market opportunities that's distinctive within the endocannabinoid system modulation companies. That we have a robust patent estate, and that's the reason we can go after billion-dollar market opportunities. And we have a proven leadership team that knows what finished and good looks like and has the resolve at Artello to see these products through their valuation inflection points. Let me share with you about the 3 programs that we have here at Artello. Now, if you believe, like we do, that there's a treasure trove of drug development opportunity by modulating the endocannabinoid system, then it would be fair to say as investors, you might want to place bets across the different ways to modulate that endocannabinoid system. And I can say that from our perspective, as we've looked out at the marketplace, Artello is the only company that is a full spectrum endocannabinoid modulation company. What do I mean by that? Is that our lead clinical asset is a synthetic cannabinoid, targets the main receptors of the endocannabinoid system. Our second program is a fatty acid binding protein 5 inhibitor that regulates, it's an inhibitor to a protein that can modulate or regulate lipid signaling and your endocannabinoid tone, or your self-made cannabinoids. Our third program takes advantage of what nature has developed, and that is a chemical in the form of CBD that can be optimized, and we believe we've done that with our co-crystal. Our co-crystal has the benefit of being the first and only composition of matter patent issued by the U.S. Patent Office for a co-crystal of CBD. Oftentimes I get asked the question in a very simplistic way, how did you patent something in the public domain like lettuce? And not to say that CBD is like lettuce, but it's in the public domain. And I'm going to unpack that and share with you a little bit about that as we move forward. Our first 2 programs came to us from outside of Artello. The original, the lead asset was originally developed at AstraZeneca, a global pharmaceutical company. And Stony Brook University, with the help of NIH funding, developed our second family of protein inhibitors under this symbol at Artello of ART, or ART 2612. Our third program speaks to the credibility that we have here at Artello, and that is our co-crystal of CBD. Now, we're a company that makes promises, and we deliver on those promises. We put check marks up there so you can see that during 2020, when it was a difficult year for a lot of companies, including Artello, everything in our control we went out to deliver on. And this year, what can investors have to look forward to? Well, there's 2 principal areas that we can look forward to milestones here at Artello. First and foremost is the clinical data from our lead asset. And this is in the form of clinical data from the CARES study. We'll share with you in just a moment about that. But there's 2 tranches of data, data from the first stage of that trial, as well as the second stage. And the first stage information or data is intended or expected to come out before the end of this year. And then by about this time, or a little before this time next year, we're expecting the full data from the CARES study. And then any preclinical data that we have from our 2 preclinical assets, we would look forward to releasing to the public. And that would be data that it differentiates our assets from others. So I'm going to spend just a couple minutes talking about our lead clinical program. This is ART2713, and this is for cancer anorexia. Now, any of you that have been around the cancer journey know that cancer anorexia and the metabolic wasting, which is called cachexia, that syndrome affects 6 out of every 10 late-stage cancer patients. Anybody that's been around the cancer journey, been a caregiver, or had a loved one going through that journey knows that this is a loss of appetite. It's experiencing weight loss. It's a loss of tissue, a loss of muscle. It's a loss of quality of life, and eventually a loss of life itself. Unfortunately, between 3 and 5 out of every 10 people that die of cancer die of the anorexia associated with cancer. It's a high unmet need. There is no current standard of care. The largest professional society of medical oncologists is ASCO, or the American Society of Clinical Oncology. And they said last year in the guidelines, about exactly 1 year ago, there is no pharmacologic standard of care to treat cancer cachexia. So, and if you look across the Western world, North America, the United States, Canada, the UK, or Europe, there is no regulatory approved drug to treat cancer anorexia. Now, despite that, physicians are using a number of drugs off-label. Not one of them has risen to the standard of care. There are drugs like Decadron or steroids that are used as a short course, but these can be immunosuppressive. And while they do temporarily, for some patients, increase appetite, unfortunately, that can dissipate as the drug is taken off. So let's talk about what's special about Artello 2713. Well, this is a synthetic new chemical entity, as I mentioned before. It doesn't come from the sky, doesn't come from the soil, doesn't come from a plant. It comes from the labs of AstraZeneca. And the 2 special features of this is that it is a dual full receptor agonist of the CB1 and the CB2 receptors, the main receptors of that endocannabinoid system. Now, we have to give cannabis users a debt of gratitude or thanks because they've taught us that the ingestion of cannabis can increase appetite. The THC, the active ingredient in cannabis that is causing that appetite, is only a partial agonist. So that's the first distinctive feature of our drug. So nature did produce an interesting chemical, but this has been optimized at the labs of AstraZeneca. The second, in the form of Artello 2713, the second feature is that our drug is peripherally restricted or selective. And I'm going to show you a little bit of information about that on the next slide. So what does our drug do? I've represented that as a capsule on there. You take it, or a patient would take this once a day, and it would trigger receptors that are in the gut region. And most of us grab our stomachs or our tummies around lunchtime and say, "Feed me, I'm hungry." And that effectively sends a signal to the brain. So the drug doesn't have to go to the brain. The signal goes to the brain through the endocannabinoid system. So what evidence do we have that we're excited about here at Artello? Well, first of all, data that came out of AstraZeneca is depicted on the left-hand side of your screen. This is a 50-patient study. These are patients with low back pain, where AstraZeneca was originally studying the drug. And they did 5 different dose levels. At each dose level, 8 people received active drug and 2 received placebo. And there was a big distinction from those that received active drug. And the more drug you got, the more appetite you had, or the more weight gain, I should say. And those patients that had placebo did not have an increase in weight gain. And if you were able to put a statistical figure to this, the p-value would be 0.0001. So I would dare say at the Benzinga conference, there isn't even a handful of companies that has this kind of evidence from phase 1 data with their drug going into a phase 2 trial. So we're very excited about what we have, and we feel an obligation with the drug we have to move it forward in development for cancer anorexia. The second part of this I wanted to make sure I mentioned, and that is the peripheral restriction. So why is that important? Because if you did have something that's a full agonist of the CB1 and the CB2 receptors, and it got into the brain, you would get the high or euphoria or fuzzy feeling that is not wanted by cancer patients. So anybody that says instead of our drug, they could just take THC, fails on two reasons. One, THC is not a full agonist. So ours is like a full light switch, not a dimmer switch on. And second of all, we can give you the hunger without the high, or the loss of control that cancer patients are not looking for. So what we're doing about that is we're doing the CARE study. This stands for the Cancer Appetite Recovery Study. And we're doing this primarily in the UK, although we're getting interest outside of the UK for other sites that want to sign up for this. Within the first 6 months, we anticipate the first tranche of clinical data, so that would be before the end of this year. And then about this time next year, the full data to read out. We feel that's a really important time in the inflection of value here at Artello. I'm cognizant of the time, and so I want to move to our second program. This is an inhibitor of fatty acid binding protein 5. And so switching gears, this is to modulate or regulate your self-made cannabinoids. But when they were developing for that, for self-made cannabinoids, lipids or fatty acids, which endocannabinoids are also feeding the growth of cancer. And so there's a difficult cartoon to explain in just a few minutes, but inside the cell, there's a chaperone for fatty acids, and when it feeds the nuclear receptor, it stimulates a gene that accounts for the growth locally and the migration of cancer, called vascular endothelial growth factor. And so interrupt this signaling, and perhaps we can get a real result in helping starve cancers of the feeding through fatty acids. And that's exactly what the University of Liverpool did when they took Stony Brook's drug and they put it in a highly metastatic, castration-resistant model of prostate cancer. And in just 30 days, you can see the mice that were unprotected with our inhibitor at the top of the screen. Their cancers grew much more than the mice at the bottom of the screen who had their cancers protected against the growth through the feeding of and stimulation of the gene through the feeding of fatty acids. So we're very excited about this program. We're aiming to get it into the clinic by the end of next year. And any differentiating data like we have here, and we have others that has been published, we'll make sure that it is available to investors. The leading drug in this sector today is Avastin. And to my knowledge, Avastin does not have single agent activity data like is represented in this slide here. The last program I promised I would mention is our proprietary patented co-crystal of cannabidiol, or CBD. Now, many people are enamored with the activity of CBD, and so are we. You can either go through and protect that through orphan drug designation, as GW Pharmaceuticals has, or like in other companies at Zenerba, you can try and protect that through a special delivery system. We did not choose either of those pathways. We actually took advantage of an inherent flaw to either synthetic or naturally extracted CBD, in that it's polymorphic in nature, meaning it's a lot like, an analogy I use is H2O. It's a lot like H2O existing in a solid, liquid, and gas form. That would be indicative of something being the same chemical in nature, but existing in different forms. And I know that's a temperature change and it's not perfect, but it shares with you that CBD inherently has multiple shapes, and we select out a single shape out of that, retains all the pharmacology of CBD, but it has improved drug-like properties. So that's the first advantage that we believe we have, and that's the basis for our patent estate, which is our second advantage that I wanted to mention, that we have an issued patent through the end of 2038. So anybody wanting to build a generic to our drug would violate the specifications and estate of our patent. And then last but not least, we sandwich this with tetramethylperazine. It's a plant extract that's used as a food flavoring in Europe, but at high doses, it looks to have medicinal properties as a neuroprotectant. We bring that together in the form of a co-crystal to form Artello 1211. And we're moving that through differentiating studies through the preclinical setting, hoping to get this into the clinic. A little bit about our company and our financial situation. This is capitalization data as of the middle of last month at our last 10Q filing. We had $11 million in cash. We have no debt, no equity line. Our run rate for cash has been somewhere between $300,000 and $600,000 on a month-to-month basis. So you can see that using your own math skills, that this is anticipated to be quite a cash runway for us. What's more important there is that do we have the cash to get to meaningful milestones? And unequivocally, I can state the answer is yes. Common shares outstanding, 23 million, and pretty significant trades on the NASDAQ under the symbol ARTL. Last but not least, I wanted to just revisit the 5 main points I made at the beginning. One, I think you can see that as a full spectrum endocannabinoid modulation company that's really focused in on its applications in cancer, that we do have a novel pipeline that is amplifies the upside opportunity and mitigates risk by the diversity that we brought into the company. That there are near-term milestones over the next 6 to 12 months that should be highly impactful for the company. That we're going after billion-dollar market opportunities with this under the backdrop of a really robust patent estate. And I don't have the time in this presentation or discussion with you to share about the exquisite team that we have here at Artello, but I would invite you to go to artellobio.com and see the members of the team whose bios are represented on that. And with that, I will stop and ask if there are any questions.
Let's find out. Any questions in chat? We got 1 or 2 more minutes for Greg Gorgas. He's the president and CEO of Artello Biosciences. You can see it up on the screen, the URL, the ticker, ARTL. I think we are set on the question front. We did have someone saying, a few people saying in chat, saying they own shares and plan to continue buying more each month this year. So you got some fans, Clyde W, Joseph Vaughn. So you got some fans in chat. Greg Gorgas, thank you so much for coming on with us today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this conference. I, like many of the folks that have been participating in this presentation, I am too an investor, and you can read our Form 4 filings to see that. So I'm an investor right alongside with you. I believe there's tremendous promise here, and we have our best years ahead of us.
All right. Thanks a lot, Greg, for joining us at the Benzinga Global Small Cap Conference.